Welcome to the Dialectic at Work, a podcast dedicated to understanding Marxian theory, its politics, its philosophy, and its economics. I'm your host, Shahram Azhar. I'm a professor of economics at Bucknell University. In the last episode, we examined Kapital Volume 2, its structure, what the book does, why Marx wrote it, and why it's relevant to the project called Das Kapital. In this episode, the dialectic goes to work, builds on our discussion in the last episode to see how volumes 2 and 3 can be used to understand the complexity and the complex world of class analysis in the real world, where producers fight with industrialists, fight with financiers, financiers have problems with merchants, and merchants have problems with manufacturers, all year long. In every single business report that you see these kinds of struggles. So let's welcome Professor Richard Wolff, who has spent, as always, as I said in the last episode as well, he's perfected the art of teaching Marx's Kapital 2 and 3, which, as our audiences have reported back to me, is a difficult word to read, and I agree with that. Professor, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. I'm appreciating all your work in making this series happen. I've always felt that my decision early in life to learn the Marxism that was so obviously absent in my education was one of the better decisions I've made in my life. And I've had a wonderful time of understanding capitalism, making use of Marx's ideas. I really feel badly for those of my colleagues who never did it because they missed out on understanding in a way that is just not available if you don't use these tools. I had to learn the neoclassical, I had to learn the Keynesian, I had to teach those things. So I can talk to them, but they can't talk to me because they have no training. It has nothing to do with being smart or anything. It has to do with where you spend your learning time. So I'm very glad to share that with you, and I appreciate all that you're doing to make that happen.
Thank you, Rick. I want to ask you about this story that I heard from my seniors in UMass Amherst, and please correct me if I'm wrong. And the story goes that as soon as you and Steve got tenured at UMass Amherst, you two decided that we're not going to write anything for a couple of years. We're only going to read everything. And after those 3 or 4 years, you guys came up with Knowledge and Class. Firstly, is that story true? Because I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about Knowledge and Class today and how it connects with Volume 2. So is that story true?
It's partly true and partly not so. Steve and I were teaching economics at the City University of New York when the offer came from the University of Massachusetts to create what was then, in the 1970s, an unheard of situation. The University of Massachusetts was willing and interested in hiring half a dozen radical, that's what we were called then, radical economists. Sam Bowles, Herb Gintis, Steve and myself, and a couple of others. And we would all come there, and by doing that, we would be a force in the department, and it would become by far the biggest radical economics program. Not only radical, it would include the conventional economics, but with that number of folks, and we all had to come from Harvard or Yale or one or another of the pedigreed institutions in this country, so that we would have all of that kind of prestige, and the administrators would keep a distance. We loved the opportunity. We couldn't quite believe it, but we also weren't naive. And neither Steve nor I would have gone had we not been given tenure as a condition of employment. So we arrived with tenure. We didn't have to wait or keep quiet about it until we got it. The other part of your comment is correct. We phrased it differently to ourselves. By that time, we knew each other a little bit. We had gotten to know each other while teaching at the City University of New York, where we both were professors and our offices were next door to each other. But by that time, we had understood that the breezy dismissal of the labor theory of value by our professors cast a bad light on the professor because it was serious, it was interesting, and it led to all kinds of insight. So we already knew, but we also understood that our profession dismissed it as silly. Don't Marxists understand that something other than labor is important? You need a machine. In other words, rendering the Marxist idea silly and childish, and then dismissing it on the grounds that it's silly and childish, and thinking you've done something other than reveal yourself to be a bit of an idiot. So our job was, how do we develop this in a way that satisfies all we can already see is possible, and yet does it in a way that evades the criticism, at least long enough so that a student will, like us, see that there's something here interesting to learn about and to use. And to that end, we looked for literature. And we looked for literature that seemed to us to both engage the Marxian tradition and also present it in a way that could not be easily dismissed. And so that's what we looked for. That's what we found. And that was very, very important to us at that time.
Wow. I wanted to ask you uh, about knowledge and class in particular, this amazing book that you and Steve wrote at the end of the 1980s. And one of the things that I found really useful about that book is that it really helps us understand contemporary capitalism. What do I mean by that? The fact that, for example, the ownership of capital, the management of the enterprise, and the appropriation of surplus value can be done by three different agents, three different people. Um, so, can you help us understand the knowledge and class project in relation with Capital 2 in particular? We've already seen in season 1 how the concept of fundamental class process that you and Steve developed comes directly out of chapter 9 and 10 of volume 1, the working day and absolute and relative surplus value, etc. Now, I want you to understand the concept of subsumed classes, as you like to call it in knowledge and class.
Right.
And how does this concept connect with volume 2? That's my question.
Okay, well, if I can ask folks to try to remember that expression that we played with in the previous conversation we had, where we talked about volume 2 of Capital. If you remember that, and even if you don't, one of the key lessons of that whole section of volume 2 that we talked about was the fact that Marx shows how the exchange of commodities is a necessary part of the story. It must happen before the capitalist exploits the worker and gets the surplus out of the worker. And then it has to happen again after the capitalist exploits the worker. That the whole of the capitalist system is a circuit, is a series of what Marx also calls metamorphoses, changes. That's what metamorphosis means. Changes of the value. The capitalist starts out with money. He converts it by exchange into means of production, tools, equipment, and raw materials that he buys in the market. He converts another part of his money into labor power. He buys the capacity to work from workers. Then he puts those things together, the means of production and the labor power, in the production process to produce an output. And the output is different from the commodities that went into the production process, and then he sells the output for money so he can resume the same process. Okay? If you have that in mind, that's all we need, because now we can get practical. What I have just said means that for the capitalist, the one who exploits the worker and gets the surplus, this capitalist has to make sure that the exchange that has to happen before and the exchange that has to happen after actually happen. And let's see what kind of problem he might face. I'll start with selling the output. The capitalist has to sell the output, whether it's an ice cream cone or a chair or a software program, whatever the output of the capitalist process is, the capitalist has to sell it. He can't do anything with tons of ice cream or a warehouse full of chairs. He has to convert them into money. He has to sell those things. That way he gets the money with which to resume the process. And only if he resumes it will he continue to get surplus. Or to say the same thing simply, to get the surplus out of your worker, you have to distribute it. And in order to distribute it, you got to get it. The two parts, producing and appropriating the surplus on the one hand, and distributing so you can get the conditions met without which you can't get a surplus, that's the system. That's the structure of capitalism. And let me give you the example, finish it, that I just gave you. Suppose that there aren't enough people out there who want to buy the output you as a capitalist are unloading into the market. You are having a problem converting your commodity output into money because there aren't enough people ready and willing to buy it. If you don't sell it, you don't get money. If you don't have money, you can't hire workers. Your ability to get surplus out of them depends on your ability to hire them, and that depends on your ability to sell your output. What are you gonna do? Well, here's an answer. Very modern. You're gonna take a portion of the surplus that you have held on to, that you have not used for anything else, and you're going to use your surplus, you're going to spend it on services you buy from something known as an advertiser, or to be even more modern, an influencer. And you're going to say to that person or that company, please go out there into the public arena and talk up my product so more people will buy it. That might solve your problem. You will then sell enough, get the money, and be able to roll it over and hire the workers, keep them coming, keep them producing surplus. Your distribution of a portion of the surplus to the advertiser / influencer was achieving a condition of the existence of your exploitation. You can't exploit a worker whose salary you can't pay. He won't come to work. But to have the money to pay him, you have to sell your output. So you're going to take a portion of your surplus and distribute it to take care of securing the condition of existence known as selling your output in its entirety. Here's a second example. You're going to take another portion of your income and you're going to hold it back. So in the event that you can't sell your product, and in the event that your influencer might have some effect, but not enough to sell it all, you might not get all the money you're looking for your output. But you will now have another option. You will go to a bank and you will say to the bank, give me a loan so I have enough money to keep my workers working, to keep my surplus being produced for me. Give me the money to use because I'm not getting it from my sales. And here's why you should lend me money, because I have surplus as a collateral. I have a bunch of money here, which I will sign over to you that if I can't pay you back in a year, this money, this value becomes yours. All right, now let me give you another example. It's one thing the capitalists learn this. All capitalists do. It's one thing to hire a worker and say, I want your brains and muscles here for 8 hours a day to get you to add value to my raw materials and my tools and equipment. Okay, you hire them, they come at 8 o'clock and they stay until 5 because that's the deal. But you quickly discover that some workers manage to need the bathroom very often during the day, and they stay there for long periods of time, way beyond what is needed to do what you normally go to the toilet for. It turns out they are smoking things in the toilet, but I won't discuss that. Okay, you don't like that. You realize that hiring them was never enough. You need to make sure that while they're there, they're doing what you want them to do, which is to work with the tools and equipment on the raw material to produce as much output as possible, because that's where your surplus is. It turns out you need to have a worker right on the scene with you who doesn't make what the workers you hire make. He never sits with the machines. He never works on the raw material. That's not what he's there for. He is, in fact, a manager, a supervisor, a person in charge of making sure that the workers you hired do their job. Okay, with this picture in front of you, I can now summarize, and I'll take it further, what we've just said. At the top, you'll see surplus value. That's what the worker produces when the worker adds more value during the production process than was paid to that worker to get him to come to work. Or to say the same thing in Marxian language, the value added by the worker is greater than the value of the labor power that the employer has purchased from the worker. When that happens, the difference, the extra value added by the worker over and above what the worker is paid as their wage or salary, is the surplus. And the sigma, the summation sign, is to say what I've just said in English in a little arithmetic way. The surplus value is distributed in what we call subsumed class payments, a language Resnick and I invented. It doesn't come from anywhere. It's in order to suggest no sooner does our capitalist appropriate the surplus than he's already in the process of having to distribute it all over the place, because if he doesn't, he can't continue to get the surplus. There's nothing voluntary about this. A capitalist who didn't distribute his surplus is a capitalist who will not continue to be a capitalist very much longer. That's why capitalists are very pressured people. That's why they get heart attacks early in life. One of the criticisms of capitalism is the horrible damage it does to the capitalists too. They also ought to welcome their own liberation. Granted, they live off their surplus. That's a lot better than having to produce it. But it comes with its own grief. Now, let me give you an example, as you see lined up there, of some other distributions of the surplus. I'm going to start at the end, the dividends. What is that? Well, suppose a company that uses M to purchase means of production and labor power in order to put them into production. Let's suppose that money isn't available to our capitalist. He wants to be a capitalist. He wants to appropriate surplus. He wants to use money in order to make more money with it, but he would love to be able to do that with other people's money. All of you will understand that because it's true for all of us. How do you get other people to do this? Well, one of the ways is to offer them a deal. You give me your money, and I will give you a piece of the ownership of this business. And that will entitle you to a share of the surplus we exploit out of our workers. Oh, good. There are people in society, if this works, who have money. They maybe inherited it. They maybe stole it. We don't really care. Capitalism never does. If you have the money and you can buy shares in the company, get a piece of it, a share of its stock, well, then the capitalist will be obliged, more or less, it depends on conventions and laws, but typically will be obliged to take a portion of the surplus he gets from the workers and distribute it to you as a reward for having provided the money with which this business functions. Now, the capitalist has to give you some dividends, or else he risks that you won't give them money. You will sell the share of stock, that will drive down its price, and everybody in the community, seeing the price go down, will be less likely to do business with you, demand more money paid sooner for anything they deliver to you. This is very bad. You have to distribute a portion of your surplus, and many capitalist corporations do that. And the name of that distribution is called a dividend. That's all a dividend is. It's a share of the surplus paid to you by the exploiting capitalist out of the surplus they've gotten from their productive laborers. Now, it is true that the capitalist decides how big a share of the surplus to distribute to shareholders, just like the capitalist decides how big a share of the surplus to put aside for a rainy day fund or to pay out to a bank to secure credit. These are all decisions capitalists have to make. They're very difficult to make. They have to be made in advance of whatever the problems are that capitalist is going to have to face next month, next year, which means there's lots of uncertainty and risk, because if you give too much to your shareholders, you won't have enough surplus left to keep your banker happy or your managing supervisor. Let's continue. Remember that before there's any production of surplus, the capitalist has to take the money and buy means of production and labor power. Now, if a capitalist does that himself, it's kind of clear what's going on. But if a capitalist grows, the capitalist hires other people to do that. These people are called purchasing managers. You'll find them in every corporation around the world. Those are the people whose job it is to find the best quality, lowest price inputs available anywhere in the world. Because it's a matter of the competitive survival of this company that it doesn't have to pay more for its inputs than its competitors do. That it gets workers who are less likely to go blow smoke in the bathroom than others. Here we go. It pays the capitalist to take a portion of the surplus to not only pay the salary of the purchasing manager, but to provide the purchasing manager with an office and a computer and an automobile and maybe some assistants and some file cabinets for their records, etc., etc. That is all paid for by a subsumed class payment, a payment going from the appropriator of the surplus, our industrial capitalist, to, in this case, the hired employee of the company who is a purchasing manager. Now, notice some of the surplus leaves the company and goes to another company called a bank. Other parts of the surplus don't leave the company. They go to a special group of workers inside the company who have a particular function that is not producing surplus. In fact, the purchasing managers live off of the surplus produced by the productive workers, appropriated by the capitalist, who then distributes it to the purchasing manager. And as we said a while back, the purchasing manager and all the people who work in the purchasing department are unproductive laborers. The capitalist has to have them because he has to make sure that the purchase of the means of production and labor power are done appropriately, best quality, lowest price. That's a condition for the survival of this capitalist so he can price his output competitively. Now let's go to the other end, selling the output. Well, now I can go faster. Every corporation has a sales department. What do? They engage in an equal exchange. They sell the output for money because that transformation, or if you like, that metamorphosis has to happen. The transformation of output commodity into money so that you can resume and hand to your purchasing managers the money they need to buy the inputs. Our capitalist, therefore, has to sustain a group of people, some inside his company, some outside the company. And what they all have in common is that those people perform activities that secure the conditions of existence of the capitalist exploitation. And that is the language in the book, Knowledge and Class. We developed that language to make this point. Of particular interest are the merchants. And let me explain what a merchant is as Marx lays it out. And the full treatment, which is an exhaustive treatment by Marx of merchants that will make clear to you in a way you've never understood before what things like Walmart represent in modern capitalism. That's in volume 3. Merchant capital is what it's called there. Like money lending capital is how he treats banks. Okay, here's how it works with the merchant. The capitalist uses money, buys means of production labor power, puts them together in the production process, and comes up with an output commodity. But now he suffers because his sales department isn't able to sell very much quickly. He wants those chairs or whatever the product is sold. The faster he can get the money. By the way, Marx goes through in volume 2 of Capital that the money has to turn over quickly because the number of times that money goes through these circuits will give you the total surplus you get in a year. If
Yes.
your product goes through slowly, you'll have less surplus with which to fight off your competitors than the one who goes through it quickly. So selling your output quickly is an urgent requirement for all capitalists. So here he is. He's got his sales department. He's got his sales manager. He's taking a portion of the surplus and he's paying it out to them for all of this, but they're not doing a very good job. It's going slowly. And he yells at them. And they say to him, well, the only way we could do it faster is you got to hire more salesmen and saleswomen, and you've got to give them all a computer and an automobile so they can run around and sell the crap that comes out of this factory. Okay? So the manager, the capitalist, is very unhappy because he knows the more of his surplus he pays for sales, the less he'll have to pay for his purchasing manager, the less he'll have to give his banker, the less he'll have to give dividends to his shareholder. Every payment of the surplus is painful for the capitalist because it's that much less surplus left to take care of all the others that he has to keep happy. Now imagine someone comes to him and says, hello, my name is Sam Walton, and I have a chain of department stores. That's how Walmart began. A man named Sam Walton from Arkansas, Bentonville, Arkansas, that you never visited, that you never heard of, and with any luck, you never will. But in Bentonville, Sam Walton begins. He arrives at this unhappy capitalist door and he says, you are spending X million dollars a year on your sales department. I will give you all the sales you want. I will back my trucks up to the back of your factory and we will load as fast as your product comes off your assembly line. It will be in my truck. I will take care of everything. And I will only charge you half of what you're now paying to your sales manager and your sales department. Oh, thank you, says our capitalist. He's about to save millions of dollars and get his stuff sold immediately because Walmart will give him a check right there as the truck leaves. He's standing there with half of what he had to spend before, and he's in seventh heaven. Why is Walmart doing that? Because they have a chain of stores. They can get this stuff sold much quicker than a handful of people in cars or driving around. He's got the people coming to the Walmart. That's his business, and he can sell it incredible. So he's happy. Now, what this means is that our capitalist is going to do this. And the way he accounts for it is he says to Walmart, okay, I'm going to pay you half of what I used to pay to my sales department. And here's how I'm going to pay you. I'm going to sell you the output at a discount to what it's worth. And the discount is equal to the half that you're paying me of what you. So you're going to unload this product. You're going to get half. We're going to get a discount. I'm going to get half, but I'm still ahead compared to where I was before. And Walmart says, that's great. We will buy it from you at a discount, sell it at its value, and Walmart's income will be the difference. And notice, this is a merchant buying at a discounted price, selling it at its value, and making up the difference. Does the Walmart make a profit? Yes. Are they capitalists? Yes. Are they merchant capitalists? Yes. Are they the industrial capitalists that appropriate surplus? No. Marx, therefore, has to say and underscore it for us. There are industrial capitalists who exploit workers, and there are merchant capitalists who do no such a thing. And there are banking capitalists. And the employees of bank capitalists and merchant capitalists, like the bankers themselves, are unproductive labor. They may get salaries, they may get, which means that in Marxian theory, just to give you a taste of where this can go, a phrase like the wage-earning class is, for Marxism, problematic because it collapses together the worker who produces surplus for the employer and is exploited thereby, and the worker who doesn't. I'm not ranking, neither of them is more important, as Marx keeps saying to us. You need them both. You need the bank to do its function. But they depend on each other in a very particular way, and we can understand it by looking at the production and distribution of the surplus. The distribution are the subsumed class payments, and they can take the form of a wage you pay to someone, a salary you pay to someone, a budget you give to someone, a dividend you assign to someone. It has different forms, but it's all the distribution of a surplus. And you have to do it because otherwise you won't survive. And now here, in the time we have left, let me introduce, because you teased the audience there, Sharon, and I want to deliver on your teasing. Suppose Walmart has helped you grow. You're a capitalist. They love you. You came and you saved them half of their bill for the sales department, and they could take the money they used to spend on the sales department and use it to grow the business. The accumulation of capital is one of the uses of the surplus. If you have enough surplus, you can afford to grow your business. And let's assume this business did, and its output doubled over 5 years, and then doubled again. And all the time, no problem, the Walmart truck backs up to the factory each year. It's just a wonderful deal. Then one day, there's a knock on your door, and there are two gentlemen in trench coat raincoats. They look like every bad mafia movie you've ever seen. And they look like it, they talk like it, and maybe they are, but you'll never know. And they say, we're here from Walmart. And we at Walmart have been done a big favor to you over the years, because they have his information in front of them. And now it's your turn to be good to Walmart. As of tomorrow, you're going to give us a much larger discount than you have over the past 10 years. Instead of giving me 10% off the value, you're going to give me 20% off the value. This is wonderful. This is the part they don't say. This is wonderful for me as Walmart, because look at my profit's going to get much bigger because you're giving me whatever I'm getting, and I'm selling it at the same old price. So I'm going to make a bundle. You, on the other hand, are screwed. But let me explain to you that if you don't do this, you're going to be screwed more. Why? Because you're now a big producer. We have your product in every Walmart from here to Timbuktu, and we will take it out of every Walmart if you don't make this deal. And you can hire a sales department. It'll take you 20 years to get it to the point where we are selling your product now. Every producer who gets into bed with Walmart is making a Mephistophelian deal. You're dealing with the devil. And that's not because Walmart is bad. It's because it's in the nature of the business. Walmart wants to maximize profit, just like you. And Walmart won't stop if doing so requires you to die. You will end up working your rear end off for Walmart. You will be bitter, you will be upset, and you will not have much of a choice.
Well, it seems to me that when you were explaining all of this, that as Marx says in volume one, it's like the vampire is sucking the blood out of the workers. And it seems to me that volume two is about how the vampire is going to share the spoils with the vultures. And, so I guess my
You know,
question is,
there's one. Let me add one. When a story like this and it has happened 1,000 times. I know people in small businesses who made this deal, who grew big, and who are now desperate. One of the things that happens is that the producers of the goods that they sell to Walmart, who sells it to us, try to react to being squeezed in this way by Walmart by squeezing their own workers, both their productive workers and their unproductive workers, in order to offset the extra part of their surplus they have to give to Walmart by squeezing more surplus out of their productive workers or cutting back, laying off one of the three lawyers they keep on the premises, or postponing the repayment of a loan to the local bank, which makes the next time they come for credit a much more difficult. You can watch the disintegration of capitalism as the productive capitalists and the unproductive fight with one another. And as you said early on, Sharon, these struggles are crucial, as as important in their way as the struggle between the capitalist and the productive worker over the surplus. Marx did not focus on that because it's more important. He focused on that because other people didn't see it. It was opaque, it was invisible. He wanted to bring it foreground. But you can see terrible consequences as well. Here, give you another one. Periodically, the industrial capitalists and the unproductive capitalists, the bankers, the merchants, they get together and form a coalition to destroy another subsumed class in order to free up the surplus by destroying the other one so they can get it. I'll give you an example. The favorite one, the government. One of the things you need to do with your surplus is pay taxes. And you pay taxes to the government because it provides certain conditions of existence. If your workers come to the front door threatening you to take over the factory, you need to be able to call them, the police and the army, to come in there and save you. And you have to have a police and army ready to do that. And that costs money. So you pay taxes. Yeah, but if you can make an ideology and really purvey it to the people that the government is useless, that the government is full of people who do nothing, then you could get together and cut the taxes. And that's wonderful because that money you don't have to spend on the government. is now available to give to Walmart, to give to your lawyers, to give to your shareholders. And that's, you like that idea. And that will be popular for a while until the government, having no money, can't do for you what you need. And then there'll be a big to do, and you'll reverse all of that. But if you're a Marxist, you understand you're not caught up. This is not the end of capitalism. This is how the system works.
Wow. I'm reminded of, because we just have about 4 or 5 minutes left, I'm reminded of this amazing set of articles and books that your former student, Rick McIntyre, and Michael Hillard, audiences should go and check out their work, have done on how this circuits of capital approach that Marx is developing in volumes 2 and 3, and with these rich kinds of complex class struggles taking place between merchants and financiers and producers, etc., how this can be turned into a understanding of the actual movements of investments in the last 30 to 50 years, the evolution of the US economy from one that used to produce automobiles to one that basically sells things at Walmart and finances them via Berkshire and Hathaway and all of these holding companies, Warren Buffett and all the rest of it. Um, I just wanted to conclude with one final question, which deals with this issue of the government in particular as one subsumed class, and the role of that government can then play. As you explained earlier, subsumed classes provide conditions of existence. So I wanted to end with the following question: is it possible that a company called Tesla experiences a decline in its operating margins because it's unable to compete with BYD, and its operating margin declines to 6%? It's a pathetic company in terms of generating profits, in other words. Is it possible in a hypothetical world? I don't know if such a world exists. Is it possible that the owner of this hypothetical company would have some fun with the government and become a part of the government and try to influence policy to eliminate competition? In other words, to make subsumed payments to a government to eliminate foreign competition via tariffs, etc., and fight for those kinds of policy reforms. Is that a policy? Is that a possibility within this analysis?
Absolutely. The history of capitalism is the history of deals like that being made uh, between firms and the government, between whole industries and the government, often made at the expense of all the rest of the capitalists. When a government allows a company to become a monopoly, it can jack the price of its output above its value. Everybody has to pay. The way you handle that is every other company that buys, say, railroad freight from a railroad company has to give the railroad a price above value. It's no longer an equal exchange. Where does that extra come from? Answer: they have to use a part of their surplus to pay the premium of the monopoly price. And that's a deal made by a government and an industry. And it will continue until the companies screwed by that force it to change. When they decide, and then they'll bring in the mass of people, but that's in order to get the legislation pushed through. It's not the center of the story. Then you'll get an antitrust department. Then you'll break up the company. They break up AT&T into half a dozen phone companies and so on. But I believe we've reached the end of our allowable time. So
Absolutely.
thank you very much. I hope that we will continue soon. And I hope that this is interesting and useful to the people who watch it.
Absolutely. So, guys, as we saw in today's episode with volumes 2 and 3, Marx has quite literally opened the analytical door to a complexity of class struggles, not just within the workplace, but in the capitalist economy as a whole. And we'll return to this particular problem in the next few episodes. We're still discussing Capital 2, and we have this really important issue to discuss with Professor Wolf that deals with turnover time, and circulation costs. All right, guys, I hope you got something out of it. I'll see you all in the next episode. As always, the philosophers have only interpreted the world. The point, however, is to change it. I'll see you all. Thank you. There you go.